This is Mikael Behrens, again at the Hill Country Conservancy Nalle Bunny Run Wildlife Preserve on January 9th, 2021. A very cold morning for Central Texas. It was 28 degrees as we drove over the bridge this morning, and it's about 31 degrees here at the top of the hill on the Nalle Bunny Run. I'm curious to see if maybe that was cold enough for our native frostweed to produce the ice ribbons that it's named for. We'll see. We'll check on that. The birds, since we're in the middle of winter right now, the songbirds are all about just surviving and getting through the cold months. They're banding together in mixed species foraging flocks in the woods, where birds of multiple species hang around in a flock and move around in the forest foraging, and they're all watching out for predators and listening to each other's call notes and alarm notes to stay warned of anything they see. There are lots of cedar waxwings right now in the area. I've heard reports of large numbers of American robins that are often together in the same flock. I just heard a robin flying overhead. There are lots of American goldfinches, which is a winter resident and often mixes with our year-round lesser goldfinch species. They love the seeds up in the cedar elms. Right now, the bare cedar elms have lots of seeds on them, and you can often find big groups of these American goldfinches and in the cedar elms, mixed with, like I said, the lesser goldfinches, also house finches. And one unique thing this winter is there's been an eruption of pine siskins, little streaky birds about the same size as an American goldfinch that can appear like a female house finch, which is also a very streaky bird. But the pine siskin is a little smaller. It has a daintier, pointier bill, and it has like a yellow wash to its sides sometimes, especially when you see the wings. So there could be, winter is the time of wild ducks in Texas. Most of our wild duck species are migratory and just here in the winter. So maybe we'll check the lake and see what we can see across the lake for ducks, and we'll see whatever else we can find on this cold morning. Monthly check of the spring box here at the Nalle Bunny Run. And there went a frog that we still see. Look at that big old leopard frog. Maybe two of them scrambled out onto the other side of the lid. Cool. Yeah, I've gotten some pictures of the leopard frogs here, and they are the Rio Grande leopard frog rather than the southern leopard frog. You can find either in central Texas. We're down on the sandy prairie habitat type, standing on a huge Texas leafcutter ant colony, which is inactive in this cold morning. But then looking up along the horizon, you can see all the fog that's obscuring the cliff on the other side of the lake. And often on cold, clear mornings like this, a bunch of fog is generated over the water over Lake Austin. And it's very dramatic. It's just very isolated right over the lake and almost nowhere else. And we're seeing some of that as the sun is getting higher. It's starting to clear off, but it's really neat to see the obscured other side of the lake right now. Here on the lower part of the preserve, now that we've come downhill onto the sandy prairie area down by the lake, we found at least one meager example of frostweed's namesake down at the base of this dead frostweed stalk. A little bit of ice, a little bit of the ice formations that happen when it gets cold enough. So Carolyn spotted in the distance, still roosting this morning on a distant, I think that's a cottonwood tree, this red-tailed hawk. You can see down at the bottom, it's reddish tail, just a little bit of red in the bottom there. It has a relatively clear breast with a little bit of a band across it, that's called the belly band, and that's a good indicator a lot of the times to identify the species. Red-tailed hawk is a super variable and successful species all over North America. These are usually the species you see perched on light posts as you drive down Mopac or 183. And here's one probably waiting for it to get a little warmer, waiting for the fog to clear. And we noticed actually, let's see if I can find, oh, look at him scratching his head there. If I move down, there was actually a second bird. Having a little trouble finding it. There we go. This is also a red-tailed hawk, and I bet you these are a pair. I think at this point they're pairing up for mating season, future coming up. And yeah, just the fact that there are two red-tailed hawks and this close together, and it's a pretty territorial species. I'm pretty sure this is a bonded pair that'll try to nest this spring. Ooh, what's flying overhead? An Egyptian goose. Egyptian geese are an introduced species, natively from Africa, but they're a real common ornamental bird that has established feral populations in lots of places, including Lake Austin here. The Nalles, Bill Nalle tells me about seeing them around the edge of the water on their docks all the time. So I found this last weekend, and it's still here. It looks like there's a convergence of at least one or two coyote tracks to this yopon bush, and then around the bush is this really clear established trail. There's some tracks coming away from it this time. All around the bush here. And I speculated last weekend that maybe this was two coyotes playing with each other, like if you've seen dogs playing around an obstacle, you know, like maybe something similar was happening here. But really, who's to say? You know, it's really impossible to know the real story, but you just never know if you stay observant and open-minded. You never know what you're going to find when you go out observing nature. Until a few seconds ago, both hawks were still there, and we heard one vocalize, and there goes the other one. So we just came upon this cedar tree. In the left edge of the cedar tree, there's a lot of bird activity. And you see now, we got a little too close and scared them all off the ground, but there was a mix of cardinals and probably sparrows. Oh, and beautiful male house finch. Oh, and there's like a chipping sparrow that's perched up on a twig. And so all these birds are foraging on the ground, and they're right next to this cedar tree, so they can immediately go back for safety. Go, you know, being on the ground is kind of dangerous and exposed to predators like the American kestrel we saw. Here's a female house finch that was part of the group of birds foraging on the ground we were watching. And there's just a lot of activity in and out of this little, looks like an agarita bush. There's a really pretty male house finch. Another male. The males look like you took a gray-brown streaky bird and threw a bucket of red paint on their face. So we just came on the spotted towhee, a big member of the sparrow family, but much more colorful than many sparrows are. Do you see the reddish-brown rufous sides and the black head and black and white spots on the, or white spots on the back? Don't know, it has a red eye as well. I don't know if that'll come out, if that'll be visible. But this is a bird that likes the low brush, and it's fortunate we're able to get this look at it. It looks like a male because it has a very black head. The female will be more brown. Very cool. Little yellow-rumped warbler that responded to a few pishes in the morning, clear morning sun. You can see the white panels on the tail, the streaky breast, the white throat. That means this is a subspecies, the myrtle warbler. That's the usual species. See a little bit of yellow there on the shoulder. One of our common winter resident species. Oh, you could just see a little bit of the yellow rump as it left. We spotted this American kestrel way up at the top of the left cottonwood tree of these three or four big, magnificent adult cottonwood trees. And it's at a little bit of a difficult angle for us, but you can see it looks like a male has the bluish gray wings. And back, and hopefully you'll see if it turns for us. It has a really neat design on its face. This is American kestrel is a falcon, and it's one of 3 or 4 native North American falcons, and it's migratory. It's just here in the winter, and they eat mostly insects, but will occasionally try to take a small bird too, a songbird. So this is one of the aerial predators that those mixed species foraging flocks I talked about in the intro are very aware of and wary of. And if this falcon decides to fly out over the woods, sometimes you can hear the effect of like the birds quieting down, and see the effect of the birds going down and getting cover. Here's a sharp-shinned hawk, judging by the rapid wing beats and squared off tail. A another winter resident bird that specializes in hunting other birds, but in the woods rather than out in the open like the falcons do. And boy, there's a lot of birds for it to hunt in this area. You can hear all the pine siskins in the background. Common ravens are here in small numbers in central Texas. Hear it? Oh, there's 2. I hear 2 croaking. Here comes the other one. You can see that long tail, with that long tail with the it's rounded tail. It's not super squared off. That's one way to tell them from a crow. Also, their lower voice. A lot of people don't know there are common ravens here in Austin. For some reason they stay on the west side. usually. Some people joke they won't go east of Mopac. And here's another look at probably the same American kestrel, now at a better angle for the light, but with a twig right in front of his face, unfortunately, but you can still see. Wow, and I hear pine siskins and American goldfinches and house finches around me. And this American kestrel might be interested in seeing if it can get an opportunity to grab one. But you see the stripes on its face, the gray crown. Now he's looking all around, looking for, I bet he's looking for hunting opportunities. He's perched at the, oh, and there went the Carolina wren. To the left, male singing, and then the female making that rattle. That's their duet. The male sings that real musical song, and the female does that rattle. Here's a less obscured look at the male American kestrel that we were watching earlier. You can see the face a little more clearly now, and you can even see its feet. It's perched on top of a cypress tree at the edge of Lake Austin. Here on the Nalle Bunny Run, watching, looking around, looking for potential prey. And this place is loaded with little birds. And I bet it's looking for an opportunity to grab one. It's bobbing its head up and down. I think that's a behavior that's common across species, common to a lot of species with forward set eyes, or not just forward set eyes, but it's a way to get different angles on what you're looking at and take that into account and get a better idea of position and distance, I believe. We're under, gosh, 50 or 60 pine siskins. Oh, and see the waxwings? Mostly we can hear the chatter of the pine siskins with an occasional zzz. It's a remarkable year, a remarkable winter. We're going to try to attract a mixed species flock of songbirds by playing an eastern screech owl trill that I have a recording of on my phone. We're going to go into the woods and find a spot and set the speaker up and let the screech owl call play and see what comes in. This triggers the songbirds' defensive mobbing instincts. And in a best case scenario, like a dozen birds will come in and try to find the owl and mob it. And sorry, I see a hawk. So we're going to, and I think also human voices affect how curious the birds are to a stimulus like this. So we're going to stop talking and creep into the woods, find a spot and set this up and see what we get. that was a pretty fun response to the eastern screech owl recording. So you'd think that playing the sound of a predator to these birds would make them go away, but instead they come towards it to mob it. One to warn, and they make sound. You know, they make their alarm calls. One to warn other birds in the area that they've detected this threat, and two, if they get enough birds together, they can try to drive the predator away. You know, force it to leave the area, and those are the two explanations of the counterintuitive behavior of coming to the threat rather than going away. So we had a great morning on the Nalle Bunny Run here, January 9th. It's warmed up a bit. The bird activity was really high, and even starting out, before we saw a lot of birds, we went to the spring and saw a big leopard frog when we lifted the lid to the spring. Then we went down the hill onto the sandy prairie area and saw just a little bit of frostweed frost, the ice crystals that form at the base of the frostweed. It wasn't quite cold enough for us to get a really big, quote, bloom of that, but we did find a couple of small examples. And then, man, the bird activity down on the sandy prairie area was really high, with tons of house finches and American goldfinches and pine siskin. And we were treated to a view of Carolyn spotted a couple red-tailed hawks that had been roosting. I bet they'd been roosting there all night in a cypress tree. We got good looks at those later. We heard one of them vocalize before they both flew off mid-morning. We had a couple of common ravens fly over us, vocalizing, croaking. You could really see how huge they were, bigger than the red-tailed hawks, and their lower voice. You can tell, one way to tell them from crows is their low croaks that we got to hear. And then we came back up, starting back up the hill, just so many pine siskins. Like I said earlier, this is more pine siskins I've ever seen in central Texas in the winter. I'm estimating there were probably 100 that we saw today and we almost saw 30 species of birds. We came back up the hill. We went into the woods and played a screech owl recording for a few minutes and called in a modest group of birds that included a hermit thrush that we hadn't seen yet this morning, and a yellow-bellied sapsucker making some sounds. The yellow-bellied sapsucker is a winter resident woodpecker that's normally kind of retiring, and so those were two obscure birds, neat to see based on our playing of the screech owl recording. And we even got to see a spotted towhee that popped up unexpectedly, and got some footage of that. Sharp-shinned hawk was just a banner morning for opportunities to observe birds, and so happy we can share this with you.